Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be diving into something pretty fascinating. Basically, we're going to be looking at how the things we believe can actually change how we see the past. It kind of like, how our minds kind of filter history through the lens of our own beliefs, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's a really interesting idea.
So we've got these two academic papers to help us break it all down. One of them goes deep into the whole psychology of changing beliefs, like how and why we change our minds. And the other one looks at how scientists update their beliefs when they come across new evidence. And here's a little something to get us started. One of the papers suggests that our brains might actually treat beliefs a bit like those things you just don't want to get rid of, like valuable possessions, valuing them on different levels, not just whether they're actually true or not.
Hmm. That's a really intriguing way to think about it. It kind of challenges that simple idea that we just, poof, discard a belief once we find out it's wrong. There's got to be something more going on there.
Right. Like there are all these other factors that come into play when we decide to hang on to a belief. And speaking of hanging on to beliefs, one of the papers quotes John Maynard Keynes, the famous economist. He said, quote, "When I find new information, I change my mind. What do you do?"
Ouch, right? What a burn.
Yeah, it's a great quote, but the funny thing is that research actually shows that people are often really resistant to changing their minds, even when they're presented with solid evidence that contradicts their beliefs.
So why is that? Why is it so hard for us to just let go of those outdated beliefs? What's the underlying mechanism there?
Well, the first source talks about this concept called belief utility, which basically means that our beliefs have value to us beyond just being true. Like they're not just about cold, hard facts.
Okay, I think I'm getting it. But can you give me some real world examples of this belief utility thing? Okay, so imagine you have a certain set of, say, religious beliefs, and those beliefs are shared by most people in your community. Holding those beliefs could help you make friends more easily, or even, find a job in certain fields. This is what we call an accuracy independent external outcome, meaning the truth of the belief isn't really the important part. It's more about the external benefits it brings.
So it's like the benefit is more about fitting in and less about the belief itself being true.
Exactly. Then there are what we call accuracy-dependent external outcomes. These are benefits that are directly tied to the belief being true. For example, if you believe that the stock market is going to go up and you invest your money based on that belief, well, whether you make money or lose money depends entirely on whether your belief was accurate or not.
Right, that makes total sense.
Right.
But what about the internal value of beliefs? How do our beliefs affect us on a personal level?
This is where it gets really interesting. We call these accuracy-independent internal outcomes. And it's all about how a belief makes you feel, regardless of whether it's actually true or not. Like, if you believe that you're going to live a long and happy life, that belief can provide comfort, reduce anxiety, and help you have a more positive outlook on life, whether or not you actually do live a long life.
So our beliefs can kind of act as a buffer, helping us deal with all the uncertainties of life.
Exactly. And finally, we have accuracy-dependent internal outcomes. These are feelings that are tied to how accurate a belief turns out to be. Like, remember that time you were absolutely convinced you were going to ace that exam, but then you totally bombed it?
Yeah, I've been there.
That sinking feeling of disappointment, that's an accuracy-dependent internal outcome, because your emotional response is directly linked to how accurate your initial belief was.
Okay, so we've got these 4 different ways that our beliefs can be valuable to us. But how does this explain why someone might cling to a belief about the past, even when the evidence contradicts it? Like, how does belief utility play into how we understand history?
Well, think about historical revisionism. Certain groups might revise historical narratives to make themselves feel better about their group's past, or to avoid having to acknowledge past wrongs. It's a way of shaping the past to fit a particular narrative, even if it means twisting the facts a little bit.
So they're choosing emotional comfort over historical accuracy.
You could say that. And it goes right back to those accuracy-independent internal outcomes we were talking about. Holding on to a more favorable view of the past, even if it's not totally accurate. It can make people feel better, give them a sense of belonging, even if it means sacrificing a bit of objectivity.
That makes me think about all those debates people have about historical figures and events. People get so passionate. But maybe it's not always about finding the truth. Maybe there are deeper motivations involved, motivations shaped by these different types of belief utility.
That's a really great point. It raises some really important questions about how we understand history. If our beliefs about the past are so easily influenced by our desires and emotions, how can we ever be sure we're getting the full story?
That's a pretty deep thought. It makes you wonder how much of what we believe about the past is actually true, and how much of it is shaped by these, like, hidden psychological mechanisms.
Right. And speaking of how beliefs change, the first source also talks about the role of confidence and something called metacognition, which is basically thinking about thinking
Yeah.
and how those factors can affect the way we update our beliefs.
Okay, I'm really curious about that.
Well, one of the things that really jumped out at me from the research is that our confidence in a belief can sometimes make us less open to new information, even if that belief turns out to be wrong.
Wait, really? Wouldn't being confident in something make you more open to hearing different perspectives?
You would think so, wouldn't you? But our brains, they have this weird tendency to prioritize the feeling of certainty over actually being right.
So you're saying that we'd rather feel sure about something than actually be correct. But why?
It's helpful to understand the difference between belief uncertainty and decision confidence.
Okay, tell me more.
Let's say you're thinking about vaccines. You might not be entirely sure whether they're 100% safe. That's what we call belief uncertainty. You're acknowledging that you might not have all the facts.
Right, there's that little bit of doubt in the back of your mind.
Exactly. But you can still be confident in your decision to get vaccinated. That's what we call decision confidence. You're weighing the potential risks and benefits. And based on the information you have, you decide that the benefits outweigh the risks, even though you know there's still some uncertainty.
So it's like saying, I'm not 100% sure about everything, but based on what I know, I feel good about this decision.
Precisely. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The research actually shows that having low decision confidence can make people more likely to look for new information and potentially change their minds.
Hold on, so if you're less confident in your decision, you're more likely to change your mind.
It seems counterintuitive, but yeah, that's what the research suggests.
It's like that Keynes quote we talked about earlier.
Exactly. It seems like a healthy dose of self-doubt can actually be a good thing when it comes to updating our beliefs. When we admit that we might not have all the answers, we're more open to hearing different perspectives and considering new information.
Which is super important when it comes to understanding the past.
Absolutely. History is full of twists and turns, and there's rarely a single clear-cut answer to any historical question.
So how does this idea of decision confidence apply to the way we think about historical events?
Well, imagine someone who doesn't feel very confident in their understanding of a particular historical event. They're more likely to be open to different perspectives, to dig deeper into the evidence, and to question their own assumptions.
Because they're not so attached to feeling certain.
Exactly. And that openness can lead to a much richer and more accurate understanding of the past, even if it means letting go of some of those comforting certainties we might have clung to before.
That's really powerful. You know, speaking of learning and updating our beliefs, that second source we have actually focuses on how scientists update their beliefs.
Yeah, that study looked at how psychologists adjusted their beliefs about certain psychological findings after they saw the results of these big, large-scale replication studies.
It's like, if anyone is supposed to be good at objectively evaluating evidence, it's scientists, right?
You'd hope so, right? This study was designed to see if scientists actually practice what they preach when it comes to changing their minds based on new evidence.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What did they find?
Well, the good news is that the psychologists in the study did update their beliefs after seeing the results of the replications. So at least to some degree, it seems like scientists are willing to change their minds when faced with new data.
That's good to hear.
But there's a catch. They didn't change their beliefs as much as a purely rational Bayesian model would predict.
Hold on. Can you explain what a Bayesian model is? I'm not sure I follow.
Sure. Basically, a Bayesian model is a mathematical framework for how we should ideally update our beliefs based on new evidence. It assumes we're totally rational beings, taking in new information and adjusting our beliefs accordingly.
So it's like the gold standard of how we would update our beliefs if we were perfectly objective.
Exactly.
But you're saying that even scientists who are trained to be objective don't perfectly follow this model.
That's right. Even when we try to be totally objective, we're still influenced by our existing beliefs and assumptions.
It's almost like we have this emotional attachment to our beliefs.
It seems so. It's a reminder that scientists are human too, just like the rest of us.
Right, right. Did the study look at any factors that might have predicted how much a scientist changed their beliefs?
They did. One factor that really stood out was intellectual humility.
Makes sense. The more willing you are to admit you might be wrong, the more open you are to new ideas, right?
Exactly. Psychologists who scored higher on intellectual humility were more likely to adjust their beliefs when faced with the new evidence from the replications.
So a little bit of humility can go a long way.
For sure. Now, here's something that really surprised me. The study found that scientists who had more personal investment in a finding, like maybe they'd built their whole careers on it, they actually changed their beliefs more when the replications contradicted their findings.
Really, I would have thought they would have dug in their heels and defended their work even more.
You would think so, right? But it seems like having a personal stake in something can actually make you more responsive to contradictory evidence.
That's fascinating.
It could be because these scientists feel a greater sense of responsibility to be accurate. Or maybe they're just more aware of the potential weaknesses in their own work.
So it's not always a bad thing to have a personal connection to the research you're doing.
Not necessarily.
It's a reminder that even our deeply held beliefs can change when we're faced with new information.
And that being open to changing our minds is a sign of strength, not weakness.
So we've talked about how scientists update their beliefs. But what does all of this mean for the rest of us, the non-scientists, just trying to make sense of the world and understand the past?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is that just like scientists, we might not always update our beliefs about the past as easily as we think we do.
You mean even when we come across new information, our old beliefs might still have a grip on us?
Yeah, exactly. Remember those internal and external values we were talking about before?
Right.
Things like the social comfort of sticking with our current beliefs, or the emotional security of feeling certain about things. These things can sometimes be more powerful than that drive to be accurate, especially when we're talking about our understanding of the past.
So it's like our brains are kind of wired to go for that sense of comfort and certainty, even over being totally objective.
Yeah, you could say that. And it's not like we're making a conscious choice to do it. It's more like this subconscious mechanism that's always running in the background.
Which makes it even more important to be aware of it, right? If we can kind of shine a light on those hidden things that are shaping how we see the past, maybe we can start to see things a little bit more clearly.
Absolutely. Being aware of all the different ways our beliefs can be valuable to us can help us understand why we might cling to certain ideas about history, even when there's evidence that contradicts them.
So we kind of need to develop this healthy sense of skepticism, right? Not just about the information we encounter, but also about our own beliefs and how they might be coloring our perceptions.
Exactly. It's all about developing what we call intellectual humility. That ability to admit we don't have all the answers and that we might even be wrong.
Actually, thinking about this conversation, it made me think about my own experiences.
Mhm.
I remember when I was younger, I had this really simplistic view of this one historical event. And it wasn't until I really started digging into it, reading different accounts, getting different perspectives, that I realized how much my initial understanding was shaped by just one particular narrative that I had been exposed to.
Yeah, it's like we all have these narratives playing in our heads, right?
Yeah.
Shaping how we see the world, including the past.
Right.
And sometimes it takes a conscious effort to step outside of those narratives and see things with fresh eyes.
Exactly. It's about constantly questioning, exploring, and being open to new information. And, this deep dive has really driven home the point that history isn't just a bunch of dates and facts. It's something that's constantly being reinterpreted through the lens of our present-day beliefs and values. It's like we're all participating in this ongoing conversation about the past, trying to make sense of it and understand what it means for us today.
That's a great way to put it. And I think the more we engage in that conversation with open minds and a willingness to learn from each other, the closer we can get to a more complete and accurate understanding of history.
I completely agree. This conversation has really been eye-opening for me. It's made me realize that our relationship with the past is much more complex and nuanced than I ever thought before.
And that's the beauty of exploring these ideas, isn't it? We're always uncovering new layers of understanding, both about the world around us and about ourselves.
Well, we definitely uncovered a lot today, thanks to these amazing research papers and your incredible insights.
It's been my pleasure. Before we wrap up, I'd like to leave our listeners with a question to think about.
Okay, I'm all ears.
If the way we see the past is so heavily influenced by things that go beyond just the facts, things like our social groups, our emotions, and even our desire to be certain, what does that say about our ability to be truly objective about history? Is it even possible to be completely objective when we're dealing with something as human as the past?
That's a great question to ponder. It's definitely something for all of us to consider as we keep learning, exploring, and engaging with history.
Absolutely.
Well, everyone, thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive into how beliefs shape our understanding of the past. It's been an amazing journey. We'll see you next time for another exciting exploration. Until then, keep those minds open and keep asking questions.